Hi, and welcome to a brand new video. In this video, we're going to be talking about the majority element problem. You're given an array, and essentially, you just need to find out which element appears more than n divided by 2 times. Since the problem also states that you may assume that the majority element always exists, then we could just find the element that appears the most amount of times and assume that's the majority element. So essentially, all we need to do, pretty straightforward, is sort the array first of all, and then we can kind of keep track of the maximum count that number occurs. So basically, we would create 4 variables. So the first one is count. That's the number of times the first element has appeared. We're obviously going to keep track of what that number is. So we're going to keep it started out as num of 0. And then we're also going to keep track of the max count, which in this case is 0 because we just started out, and the max num because we need to return the num, not the amount of times that number appears. So that will be 0 as well. At the very first element, since this information already starts at num of 0, we don't really need to check that in our for loop. We can go ahead and start at the second element in the array. So for number 3, when you arrive at this, 3 is not equal to num of 0, which is 2 in this example. So therefore, we would update max of count to 1 because that element only appeared once. We're going to update the max num to 2, and then we're going to obviously reset the count to 1 and change the number to 3. Once you arrive here, you'll notice that it's the same number. So all it does is just update count by 1, and it'll keep everything else the same. And then we're going to return the num, which has a greater count. So essentially, if count is greater than the max count, then we're going to return num. Otherwise, we're just going to return max num. So this is our logic for this problem, and let's go ahead and test it out. So first, our first step was to sort that array. The next step was to create our 4 variables. So I'm going to have int count equals 1, and num is equal to nums of 0, and then also our max num, which is going to be 0, and max count, which is also 0. And then we can start our iteration at element number 1. And then here we had 2 scenarios. Remember, the first scenario was that it's the same number. So that's what we saw in that last element here. So we can check this condition by saying if nums of I is equal to num. And then we also had that else condition that we saw in the second element. So if the number is the same, you notice that all we did was update count. So count plus plus. On the other scenario, we updated it by saying if count is greater than max count. Remember that was the logic here. We're going to set max num is equal to num and max count is equal to count. Otherwise, we don't update it, right? Because the max num and the max count is greater than the current iteration that we're through. And then obviously we need to update count back to 1 and num back to nums of I. At the very end here, we're going to do the same thing again because as you saw in this example, the max count was the count that it was at the last element. So because we never actually updated outside the for loop, we just need to return the num that's greater. So we can say return if count is greater than max count, then we're going to return num, otherwise we're going to return max num. You're going to notice that our solution was able to work out perfectly. Just kind of to reiterate what we did, we sorted the array, we kept track of which count and num we're currently on and which one's the greatest, and then we iterated through the array and updated those numbers accordingly, and at the end we just just returned the number with the greatest count. And if we submit, you'll notice that our solution worked out perfectly. So I hope this video was helpful and see you in the next video.